Hello and welcome back everybody, I'm One Proud Barbarian and this is the third Crusader Kings III dev diary, and it has been confirmed by the way that the dev diaries are going to come out every Tuesday, so every Tuesday you can expect a video made by me talking about, you know, what is good, what is bad within the dev diaries, or at least what is good and what is bad according to my opinion. Now this dev diary is the first one that I personally would say has a lot of meat. There is so much to dissect in here, so many changes. It is all about war, and I want to point out it is not about, you know, CBs, the casus belli. This is just about how wars actually fought, how you get your soldiers, how you can determine who is fighting for you, and so on and so forth. Now there will be quite a healthy amount of speculation, because at the end of the day, many of the mechanics that they kind of introduce here are not fully explained, but I will spitball, I will speculate, of course, and I would love to see you speculating about it in the comments as well, because these are huge changes coming to the war system as we know it in Crusader Kings II. And I think we should just jump right in. So, the first image, let's just take a look at that. It shows the total soldiers, so this is what we would know as the levy plus the retinue in Crusader Kings II. If you've ever played CK2, then you will know what I'm talking about. Except they have changed the proper, the composition of your army. So in this case, you just get 6,801 levies, which are, I would translate it to light infantry in Crusader Kings II. And then you have the heavy infantry, the archers, the heavy cavalry, and knights. The knights, let's exclude those for the moment. But these three are three unit types that you can choose to have if you are, for example, the right culture, or if you have the money to pay for them. Those are now called not retinue, but men-at-arms. I can only hope that this means that while they are special units, have special values and whatnot, I can only hope that they are not permanently on the map like retinues were, because retinues gave human players a very unfair advantage. You could already bring them to the borders against your enemy before you declared war. You could even already march into the, bordering realm with them, and right before you would make the tick into the other province, you could just destroy them. So let's hope that retinues do not function like that in Crusader Kings III. I mean, they are no longer retinues, they are men-at-arms. But what is really interesting about this, beyond just the functionality, is that the way that you determine what your specialization in your army is no longer at all works via the levies. We've all seen it before, everybody has provinces obviously, and you have certain buildings that give you certain unit types in Crusader Kings II. If you want to specialize on certain unit types, then you can do that in long-term investments by building, for example, a special amount, the camel training grounds if you are a Muslim and in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. Those things give you special units that then have special values. We can see it here as well. Every unit type in Crusader Kings II has a very specific value for morale, maintenance, and then attack and defense in their different phases. But the drawback that system had in Crusader Kings II has always been, and I'm going to be passionate about this. War, I know it doesn't interest everyone, but I think it's one of those topics that I was always very passionate about, because Crusader Kings II has an amazing basis. You can specialize your army, but you can't actually. Because no matter what you do in your holdings, the huge amount, the vast amount of troops that you have in a war that fight for you come from your vassals. And what buildings your vassals build in their holdings, in their counties, you have absolutely zero power over. Now in this one, they changed it. They made it so that every liege, for example, if you're a king, then you have your own men-at-arms. If you're a duke, then you have your own men-at-arms. Every liege determines what kind of specialization their army has. Now, they already say that, every region gets cultural men-at-arms. You can read that right here. And I think that is absolutely superb. It is very similar to the cultural retinue units, except now it becomes more of an integrated part in your army. You can determine what you want to focus on, and you can do it very much effectively. Levies are just, like a bunch of peasants getting together, and the men-at-arms are what truly matters. Let's talk about the kings in a bit. Let's scroll down a bit. They added something else. So now they have damage. This is obviously the amount of damage a single soldier of this type is able to inflict. Toughness. This is how much damage a soldier can take, which is just, its health. Then pursuit in the aftermath of a battle, more on this below. Pursuit increases the amount of damage you can inflict, and then, entirely new, screen. The opposite of pursuit, screen allows you to protect fleeing soldiers from being killed. I can only assume that pikemen, for example, this is their damage, this is their toughness, this is their pursuit. They're terrible at it, obviously, heavy troops, ill-equipped to really pursue anybody. You would use horses or camels, for that matter, to be rather effective. And then you have the screen, which they are also not good at, because, what are they going to do when the people are running away and routed? Counters these types, so now they have like a specific counter type, which they always had, but in this case now it's very much easier to see that information. Everybody, you know, when you see pikemen, you just organically go, hey, you know what, probably good against horses. But now that they actually address that and say light cavalry, heavy cavalry, you know, what actually is effective in what terrain is good for this unit, I think we're actually looking at a much more readable UI when it comes to the unit types and what you want, making the specialization even easier. You know, as they say in the Death Diary, if you expect to find in the mountains, then don't pick up horses. Although, of course, horse riders in CK2 do not actually take penalties for mountains. But that aside, long pikes allow these regiments to form walls of spikes that can stop a cavalry charge dead. There you go. You see the cost for reinforcements. So if those units aren't fully filled up, it costs 9 per month. But the common maintenance is just 1 ducat per month. That is quite cheap, at least I hope so. Those pikemen, we don't actually know how many pikemen you get for one, you know, men-at-arms regiment, I guess. But I can only hope that there's a healthy amount. We can see here right now they have about what? They have 700. Okay, so it's about, and this is just like rough in my head. So it's about like 9%, I want to say. 8% of your army are men-at-arms, something like that anyway. I could do the calculations, but you know what? You can do that. Nobody's gonna do it, let's be real here. What I'm saying is, your specialization is much more in your hands today in Crusader Kings 3 than it was or ever will be in Crusader Kings 2. I think that is a really good change, making it so that, of course, you know, the big body of your army, and I can already see the image. We're all excited to talk about this, aren't we? But the big body of your army is, of course, made up of units that aren't excellent at fighting. They're not properly trained, so their tactics, it's just called levies, right? And then the men-at-arms are what is specialized. The knights, let's talk about that in a second. Let's just go down here. This is amazing. You start with a tiny catapult, then a bigger catapult, a trebuchet, and what I can only call a cannon. I think this is a new era in Crusader Kings warfare. An era in which it actually is fun to think about what kind of units you want, how you want to approach a situation, and whether you can afford to, you know, assault something. So, let's get to the actual topic, to the meat of this. They say that assaults and sieges are made much more important now. They say battles are important, but give, you know, little war score, but sieges are where it is at. We've already learned that you don't have to siege every barony. So, for example, this city, or this village rather, this bishopric down here as well, you don't actually have to take those holdings because they do not have any walls around them. You can immediately go and loot them. Now these two here, they have walls, and you need to bring them down if you want to take it. Be that by, you know, just sieging them down and hungering them out, so to speak, or by actually assaulting it. And there are huge changes to assaults. I can't remember if it said here. There you go. You'll start off with access to a rather weak catapult, but it will still allow you to besiege holdings faster than without one. Now, I don't think it is actually said here, but they did say that if you want to... Yeah, it's not said here, but it is somewhere in the Death Diary. I read through it. I know it word by word at this point. If you have catapults, trebuchets, or the cannon, only then is there a chance that you can breach their walls, and only if you breach the walls will you be able to assault. Meaning that what we are talking about here now is two kinds of warfare. If you know, don't have the tech, you will have to sit there, you will have to siege, and later into the game in, you know, 3 or 4 generations afterwards, you will actually be able to consistently assault forts. Right now, in Crusader Kings 2, it's just a numbers game. If you have 10 times the numbers of the garrison, you assault. That's just the way it is. In CK3, that will be changed. There will be different phases to siege warfare, and I'm super excited for that revamp. That is definitely very, very positive in my opinion. Now here comes something. We will go back to sieges, I believe at least. We will, if I don't misremember this Dev Diary. Here's something that is an interesting thing, but they sadly don't go too much into its detail. I gotta tell you, Paradox, you can't tease it like this, okay? Because what I'm gonna do now is rampant speculation. It's all made up, but... let's talk about knights. You know, you may remember, I didn't talk about them up here, but down here, because that is the actual section where they bring knights up, but never go into the details of it. So, you can now only have one commander per army. Only one commander per army, okay? But you will have multiple knights per army. Those knights are, you know, the people with the highest personal combat rating, which is renamed to prowess in Crusader Kings 3. Those people will be knights that will serve in your army, but as real units. You can see right here for 7,500 units, so I assume, let's say for roughly 1k units, you have one knight. That is probably the average that you will get. Those knights will actually serve in the army, and they are actual characters. Now, when I read that there will only be one commander, I was actually fairly distraught because I like the flank system that they have in Crusader Kings 2. I think that is is a nice system for the combat at the time. But the idea of knights, and this is rampant speculation, none of this is mentioned in this dev diary, but I think this is the idea that I want knights to be. Whether they are that, whether you want that to be, let me know in the comments, of course, but whether they actually are that is something entirely different. But hear me out here. Right now, in a common battle, max we have 3 commanders on each side. Those commanders can duel, they can get captured, they can capture, they can kill other commanders, and so on and so forth. But that is it. Only 3 people. Obviously there's sub-commanders, but let's be real, neither the AI nor the players actually utilize sub-commanders. In this game, they got rid of the 3-commander flanking thing, but they gave you a higher number of actual characters involved in any given battle. If you have 8 knights, that is 8 characters from your realm participating in a battle. That is a huge number in comparison to what was beforehand, Maybe beforehand, of course, you would see many battles and many duels for yourself, but other than that, not much happened. Barely any AI character from your court was influenced by an actual battle. Now, in this case, this will be different. And this screenshot, by the way, I actually checked. I was like, is this a commander screen? But it is not. If you look at this, it will say DD03 Knight. So what we have right here is essentially you can apparently, and this is just a guess, force someone to be a knight participating in a coming battle. You can let them, leave it up to them. You can allow them to be a knight, but if they say no, then they don't have to. And you can forbid it. I assume that there is a huge prestige penalty, a huge prestige bonus, whether you don't participate or participate as a knight. And I assume that every single battle that is fought in which you are a knight can actually have a huge outcome when it comes to the inner realm dynamics of your enemy or of your realm. I wonder if there may be, such an event that lets you as a knight sell out a different knight, Those are the questions that I'm asking here. They did not answer them in the dev diary, just for the record. I also actually looked up Dedo. So Dedo, I believe this is him. He's not a duke, but he does exist. He was a person. I don't know if I would trust him as a knight. In 976, Dedo commanded the Bohemian army, conquered the March of Zeitz, and robbed the bishop's church. It is alleged that he even took his own mother prisoner. Honestly, this is a proper Crusader Kings 2 character, Crusader Kings character, what can you say? Now let's move on from the knights. This was fully speculation because they don't actually give us much in terms of, information on how it works, but there you go. They will say how good a character, they will say, when they participate in the battle, they participate, but what exactly that means when it comes to events, they don't give us any information on that. I am very excited to find out more about the knight system. Obviously, that deserves its own dev diary, but if my speculation is true, that will be so much more immersive than what we currently have. Now, let's move on to commanders, how the traits work, and how the battle tactics work, because I think that is quite an intense topic, because this is an entire revamp. It is a change from the very bottom of how it works in Crusader Kings 2. Now, this should be fairly common. You have the martial stat, and whoever is better has a better chance at performing well in a battle. These traits should also be obvious. This, I believe, means that he's better at looting than other characters. This probably means that he's good at defending, and this probably means that he's good at sieging. I also want to point out, by the way, this fist probably means he is an important vassal, just for the record. It's probably similar to Crusader Kings 2, but that aside, you also here have a trait explanation. This is the Holy Warrior trait, and you will already notice a difference here. Faith, hostility, advantage, plus 10. So let us talk about advantages and how it all works, because I feel like what they did is essentially changing the actual battles, not warfare as a grand thing. Warfare still very much looks like Crusader Kings. You raise your levy, in this case you have a specialized men-at-arms force, etc, etc. But I feel as though the rest of the actual battles were moved closer to what you see in Europa Universalis and Imperator Rome. I feel like both of those are the main inspiration for how it works instead of Crusader Kings 2. The sieges themselves are very much like Crusader Kings 2 because they have a linear, percentage ticking down like in Crusader Kings 2 today. There's no dice rolls there, no 64% chance of somebody capitulating. That's not how it works in Crusader Kings 2 or how it's going to work in Crusader Kings 3. But the actual battles are nothing alike between those Crusader Kings games. So, When a battle starts, all sources of advantage is taken into consideration. It can come from traits, terrain, buildings, etc., but most importantly, the martial skill of your commander. All of these are added together for both sides of the battle. The difference is then added as the advantage bonus for the side with the higher advantage, meaning that in Crusader Kings 2, and let me just open this, in Crusader Kings 2, all the terrain, all the skill, and all of that also gets taken into consideration for the battle, but it tells you without adding any of it up. So like, if you want to know about the advantage, you have to have a feeling, you know, for how your troops perform, and you gotta know these numbers a bit more by heart. What they do now is they actually add it up to an advantage so that you can tell, for example, you know, with a bad terrain, I don't know, maybe advantage minus 20. With a good advantage, you're going to be an advantage, you know, 5. So like from minus 20 and then maybe 25 points influenced by the terrain. You know what I'm talking about, right? So I believe that this is primarily a UI change. We have an example here. Your army has a total advantage of 40 and attacks an enemy army that has a lousy total of 10. This means that you will have an advantage bonus of 30 during the battle, which then translate into a rather significant damage bonus for your troops. It is very straightforward here. There's just a straight damage bonus here, making it easier for you to annihilate the enemy forces. But this is not an absolute given. If you remember in Crusader Kings 2, you had 3 commanders for each flank, or 1 for each flank, I should say. And they could use tactics depending on their traits and depending on the luck. There was a lot of RNG if you got a flanking bonus, if you got, you know, different activities and so on and so forth. All those tactics were very much randomized, and that is still here, but in a different, more easier to see and understand way, I feel. In addition to the starting advantage, each commander also makes a roll every few days in an attempt to increase the advantage or even it out. This tug of war can be further expanded by various modifiers and traits. For example, the trait Cautious Leader will decrease your potential max roll, but also increase your lowest possible roll, trading a high potential for a higher average. These exist to make even battles a tad bit unpredictable, but will rarely be the deciding factor. I think this is relevant, because we no longer have the 3-flank system. In the old CK2, if one flank fell, the battle was practically, or usually commonly, was over, because at that point you get the flanking advantage and you will win the battle no matter what. In this one, since there are no flanks, it is much more related to, you know, the standard advantage that you started the fight out with, and then the luck that you get, whether you level out the advantage or, you know, maybe even turn it into a different, into a disadvantage of your enemy. All that sort of stuff is entirely different. I want to point it out, entirely different in its core from how Crusader Kings 2 worked, but I don't actually think it is bad as long as the advantage rolls are truly, in fact, rarely the deciding factor. I think there is an issue here. If we see somebody attacking into the mountains, but they just have such a great, amazing commander that he wins 9 out of 9 or 10 out of 10 battles in the mountains because he can just level out the advantage. We need to see, I believe, the normal factors, you know, the troop stats, the terrain, the traits of your commanders. We need to see those be battle deciding. I don't think that it is a good step to go towards the EU4 random dice roll model as the main decider of battles. So I hope that what they're doing here indeed will rarely be the deciding factor. Now, with that, you know, aside, obviously you have the screen mechanic now, so if a character or if a soldier dies, but you know, that dying is just, he won't participate in the battle anymore. It will be decided whether he's a casualty or routed, and if he's routed, then you need screen to save him so that he doesn't, you know, get pushed out. They even talk about it here, how, but this is very straightforward, honestly, how the men-at-arms, you know, you can make them good in pursuit if it's a lot of horses, you can make them very good at shielding your troops if they are fleeing, but I gotta tell you straight up, if you build men-at-arms that shield your troops when you lose a battle, you're building for a loss, you know that? You're building up an army that is going to lose. I'm thinking maybe this could be relevant later on when nomads are introduced, because nomads had the common tactic where they, you know, they would do skirmishes, they would come in, they would barrage you with arrows, and then they would retreat again. If you can have this sort of warfare, which would be very annoying just for the record, but if you could have that, it would be an interesting take on it. Now anyway, it says right here, besieging and occupying enemy holdings is the main way of gaining war score. Of course, you know, everybody has seen that before. Blah, blah. We've already known this, but let me just read it out again. You will not have to siege all of them, all of the baronies. In order to occupy a full county or seize your war goal, you only actually need the fortified holdings, which most of the time will just be a castle in a county to take the entire county. Very, very similar to CK2. But the huge changes with the flanks, I don't know, it's very, very difficult to see an estimate where this goes so far. I'm actually kind of excited, but where it really will go, we will see that, I think, when they go into the details of, you know, having battles and what it actually looks like in action. But of course, that requires a lot of balancing, so don't expect seeing that anytime soon. Balancing usually in the development process for a game comes in, you know, maybe like 3 or 4 months before you release the game. So I think there's still some time to go, unless Paradox wants to release this game quite soon. You know, let's not kid ourselves. Anyway, you can see right here what I mentioned before. Blah blah. Sieges also have what we call siege events, which occur with a fixed interval and can make the siege progress faster by giving you a one-time siege progress bonus or increase your siege progress. Siege weapons, this is what I mentioned before, are required to get the breached walls event, which in turn allows you to directly assault the holding. This is a risky maneuver since it will cost you troops at the benefit of vastly increasing your daily siege progress. I think that is very much straightforward. The biggest thing that they put at the very end of the development diary, the biggest thing as far as I'm concerned, next to the knights, where we don't have that much information, but the biggest thing is supply and attrition. Oh god, if you have kept up with Imperator Rome, then you will know this system as Livy's system that will be introduced once the Livy patch comes out. It's essentially a system where if you take attrition, it does not immediately kill your troops. Right now, you know, if I am in pagan territory as a Christian and they have a supply limit of 1,400 and I come with 14,000 troops, I believe it will take away like 25%, 33%, depending on some other values, in just one tick. In just one tick, this will happen. They will just all be gone. All those troops are gone. In CK3, this will no longer happen. Much like in Livy, instead, you have supply, and that supply depletes whenever you are in hostile or even friendly areas that do not have the supply limit that you need for your troops. If your supply is actually fully depleted, only then will troops get, you know, destroyed. Attrition. Properly killed. If you can come back to a friendly, to a controlled province that has enough of a supply limit to actually fill it up again, you can restore it without losing troops, meaning no more will you just actually count the days until you leave pagan territory, because for as long as you have the necessary supply, you will not immediately die. It changes how you can move your armies on the map, and I think it changes it very much for the better. Now, there was something, where was it? Oh yes, okay, let's talk about, I believe it is this. What was it here? Let's just read this. You can no longer cross them freely, so rivers, as in CK2, and will often have to move your army to find a good place to cross. Beware though, crossing a major river will make you lose advantage should you engage an enemy in battle on the other side, meaning if you're the better commander and whatnot, then you will actually lose out by crossing. Obviously, it's a very similar penalty to the proper crossing penalty, and I don't even know, there you go, river crossing and major river crossing. It's a very similar penalty as seen in CK2, except it works around the very transparent advantage system. There's also, I can't find it right now, but there's also another one where, similar to Imperator Rome, and I believe EU4 as well, if you are sieging a holding and an enemy comes in and attacks you, then you will be the one that is the attacker. Because there has to be a penalty to you being in unfriendly, territory, as well as, of course, being somebody that besieges a fort. All of this results in a situation where we have a huge change to how the army's composition works and a much higher player influence when it comes to the army composition. It results in a huge change when it comes to how many characters participate in any given battle, and it comes with a huge change to how sieges work when it comes to siege engines. Luckily, they did stick to the linear, siege progress that they already had in CK2. But those are, in my opinion, the unequivocally, the undebated absolute positives of the changes that we are seeing here. I am personally very much split on the notion of how the actual battles will work. And what I mean by that is I like the flanking system. I think, so they will use combat width, it's also in the staff area, they will use combat width in Crusader Kings III, and I'm split on that. Because on one side, I agree, of course, when you have a battle in Crusader Kings II where you have 50,000 people, and it is in the mountains, and then you have a battle in, you have that battle in the mountains, you have 50,000, the enemy is just 500. The game, the way it works, despite you fighting in mountains where everything is narrow and difficult to navigate, the game assumes that all 50,000 of your troops are attacking simultaneously. It makes no sense. So I get that they introduce combat width, if I'm in the mountains, obviously I can't attack with all of my units, obviously it will go a bit differently. maybe having to use away from the flanking system of Crusader Kings II is a necessity to make actual terrain and the combat width that comes with it work. So when it comes to the actual battle and how that works, I'm not decided yet whether I personally think that is good. Let me know what you think, but I will tell you, when it comes to the entire rest of this dev diary, it is amazing. I cannot wait for the knight system. I cannot wait for the siege weaponry. I cannot wait for being able to actually influence what my troops and my armies look like in a more detailed, non-gamey, non-arcadey way by having the men-at-arms. I think that is absolutely tremendous and outstandingly progressive when it comes to finding new mechanics that sincerely enhance the game. And you know, if you follow the channel, you will know I'm primarily, first and foremost, I'm a role player. That's why I play CK2. But if they actually manage to make war interesting in Crusader Kings III, easy to read, with the advantage modifier now, you know, being everything of this except you don't need to know the numbers, if they manage to make war as interesting as it seems to me right now and right here, I will be absolutely just out of my mind will be blown. Let me know what you think about all of these changes, because it is a huge number of changes, let's not kid ourselves. Let me know what you think about it, if you agree, if you disagree, and what your personal takes of all of this is. Now, I do want to thank the members of the channel. First of all, of course, the Barons, the Richest T, Snywolf, Sai, and Herman. Thank you for your support. And then, of course, the Dukes, Eric, Lexo, and Benedict. Thank you so much for your support. It is what keeps the channel going. If you want to support the channel, check out the join button right under the video and the Paradox affiliate link in the description. If you buy any Paradox games via that link, you have no further costs than what the games cost anyway, but I will get a bit of a share of it. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for tuning in. Let's hope for a lively debate, because this is an incredibly dense dev diary. I will see you in the comments later. Alligator.